Hello everybody and welcome to another endgame lesson, and today we will look at a fairly difficult position and quite a tricky one. We see it here on the board. White has already advanced the pawn to 6th rank, so that's not good news for black, and the king is in front of the pawn. That's also very important. The king is supporting the pawn to advance, but still this position is a draw. But black has to act carefully. And I believe that a similar position Magnus Carlsen once lost against Levon Aronian. So in this video I'll show you how black can draw this position. Then in the next video we're going to take a look at a very similar position that's winning for white. Actually the difference is that in the other position the rook will be on b8, and that actually makes a big difference whether rook is on a8 or on b8. You want to have the maximum distance between your rook and the opponent's king, so that you can give a lot of checks without the king approaching too soon. So always make sure your rook is far away from the king. Okay, so white to move here, and he has some tries here. Rook d8, and here already we have to be careful. We cannot allow, that's one important thing to remember, we cannot allow white to bring the king to e8 and then push the pawn to e7. So if you play a move like rook a1, then white goes king e8, and next plays e7, and he has reached the Lucchini position, which I already covered in the series of Rook Endgame lessons, and white will win. Okay, so we cannot allow this to happen, so we need to stop this, and we can do so by going rook a7 check now. Because now if white plays king e8, we play king f6, white cannot push the pawn forward, we will simply take it, and we actually win this pawn right ahead. So we go check. Now rook d7, anything else really doesn't make too much sense. If the king runs out, we can continue giving checks. Check, 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 rook d5. Now we don't trade the rooks because that would be winning for white the pawn game. We just go back, rook a8, king d6, and now we can actually bring the king in front of the pawn, and it's a straightforward draw. So rook d7, and we go back once more to a8. This is simplest here. There are also other drawing moves, but this is simplest. Always cover the 8th rank. Okay, what if white goes rook b7 here? We want to keep the rook on a8, so here it would be simplest to just go king g6, just move the king forward, and if white now goes king d7, we play king f6, and the pawn comes pretty close to queening, but now after king f7, white cannot make any progress. If he leaves with the rook the 7th rank, let's say rook b1 to play rook f1, then we're in time to give checks from the side, and black wins the pawn and it's a draw. And white also doesn't have another try here available, and this is a draw. The best try for white in this position is to go rook d6, as now in this position black has only one move available. And here, let's put some interaction into this. What can black do here to hold the draw? What is your intuition telling you, maybe, based on what I said so far? Alright, so the rook is perfectly placed on a8. It's stopping white from going king e8, and it's also the maximum distance to the king. So we don't want to move the rook. If we play rook b8 here, white goes rook a6, and he is winning. No, excuse me. He does it differently. Rook a6 would be still a draw, as these rook games are tricky because black goes rook b7, but he wins the tempo. He goes rook d8, check, rook d7, rook b8, now rook a7. This is winning, and this is what we'll cover in the next video. So king g6 is the only move, because after, let's say, rook a1, once more king e8 happens and white gets into Lucchini position. Check, rook d8, and now we are too late, e7, king f6, and now king f8, and white wins. So important to remember, keep the rook on a8. Keep it as far away from the king as possible. King g6. And now really white doesn't have any more tries. He can go king d7, but then we just follow, king f6, e7, king f7, and once again the rook is just unfortunately placed, cannot give a check, and we threaten to give checks from the side. This is a draw. So rook d7, And now we can just come back. Rook c7 and just come back. King g6. And white cannot make any progress. If the king goes to d7, then we come with the king to f6. And if the king goes to d6, well, here we need to be also a little bit attentive, but we can just play king f6, I believe. Rook f7 check, king g6, and if white now wants to cut off the king by playing rook f1, then we can once again give checks from the side, and the king cannot stay close to the pawn, and the king cannot hide from the checks, and it's a draw. Check, check. Okay, and here we can already play rook e7 and go off to the pawn, and white cannot escape the checks. Alright, tricky endgame. What's important to remember here in this position, that the rook needs to stay on a8 as far away from the opposite king as possible, and that in this position the only drawing move is king to g6. If in question, just move your king one forward. Alright, I hope that was clear. Not so easy, but important to know that this position is still a draw, and by the way, it doesn't change anything if we move all of this one to the side, if white has an f pawn instead, and king on f7, f7 and so on. Actually, it becomes an easier draw for black, because then the distance between the rook and the king is further, and even if the rook was on b8, it would be still a draw. So actually the rule is there should be 3 files in between the king and the rook. This is the sufficient distance between the two to make a draw. 3 files, 1, 2, 3. Okay? Alright, let me know if you have any questions and any suggestions for future videos as well, and then I'll see you next time. Bye bye.